hopefully. So yeah, as I said, I work at Google. I work on DevTools. I've been there for nearly 7 years now. So at this point, if you've ever used any part of the DevTools, you've probably interacted with something I work on. And these days, I'm responsible for all the DevTools AI integrations and anything that touches that. And the context here for why I want to talk about AI is because really I've always been a little bit of a confessed AI skeptic. I've always sort of seen all the hype and seen everyone talking about it, and I've always just been a little bit wary of what that actually means on a day-to-day basis and how we can actually take all this hype and all this information and all this noise and then apply it to actual real engineering on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like there is a constant torrent of new information, new models, new tools, new whatever, new this, new that, new claims that AI is going to take all our jobs next week. And it's very hard to actually to kind of distill that and break through that and figure out where's the actual practical benefits and how can we use this on a daily basis. And I think in particular, one thing I see a lot is when a company releases a new model, they say, they might show it generating a new web app or an iPhone app or a whatever app. And that's fine and that's useful, but I don't know about all of you, but in my career thus far, I haven't logged on every single day and built a brand new website from scratch or started a brand new project. Most days I bash my head against years of code and decisions that have now come back to bite us on a daily basis. And so this has never really interested me that much, and I think that was part of the reason I was slightly skeptical of it. What I've always been looking for is AI helping me be productive in large, nuanced, messy code bases that have had hundreds of developers over tens of years writing code, have seen standards and decisions and managers and tech leads come and go. That's the thing I have to deal with on a daily basis, and that's where I'm always interested in any tool that could provide additional help. And one such code base is Chrome, and specifically Chrome DevTools. Chrome was released in September 2008. It's nearly 18 years old. That means there could reasonably be someone in here born before Chrome was released. I don't really know how I feel about that personally. But yeah, it's a nearly 18-year-old code base. If you think about how we were building Chrome DevTools is a web app, so how we were building websites or web apps 18 years ago and what that looks like today, there is a huge difference there. And so we have this history, this sort of almost archaeology in the layers of decisions that we now have to deal with on a daily basis. And just to give you an idea, the DevTools front-end code base, which is public on GitHub, if you have nothing else to do in an evening, you can go and find it. And it got pulled out into its own repository in 2019. And so since 2019, there have been 31,000 commits. And this is actually a few days out of date, so it's probably 32,000-ish now. And that's just since 2019. So if you expand that to 2008, this is a huge code base. It's had hundreds of developers make changes. It's had all sorts of product strategies and decisions and technical migrations come and go. And honestly, it's a mess. It's a nice mess and it's a functional mess. And hopefully, for the folks in here who use Chrome DevTools, you see hopefully a nice functional experience that is useful and helps you out day to day. I see a mess, but it's a mess that I'm very familiar with. But I'm always looking for ways that I can make this mess slightly easier to work with. And one of the things AI is pretty good at is following patterns. So if you give it a pattern for this is how I want you to build this feature, it can normally copy that and save you some time and do a decent job. But how on earth do you use AI when you have 5 different patterns from 5 different developers over 10 different years and ask it to build out features there? And that's really what I've been looking at and what I want to talk to you a bit about today. When AI was first announced and ChatGPT did that big demo 3-4 years ago, I mean, I've lost all concept of time, we were kind of sold, I think, a little bit of a lie. There was this idea that you just dump your problems into this text box and everything is therefore solved for you straight away. And I think we can probably all know that that's not exactly how it works. This claim that AI was going to take all our jobs, take everyone's jobs, take over the world, was always slightly contrived when I couldn't give it a problem in a code base and have it fixed. And so I adapted my thinking a bit to think of AI as one of the many tools I have at my disposal. At the moment, it's a very prevalent tool, and you can't really move for being asked to use AI and talk about AI. But nonetheless, it's a tool that we have to use. And if I think back through my career to the developers who have been the most impactful and I've learned the most from, they've all spent a lot of time mastering those tools, whether it's setting up your coding editor, whether it's learning all the keyboard shortcuts for your favorite app, whether it's this or that. In my case, it's spending weekends building your Vim configuration, because I'm cool like that. But the best, you have to invest in learning how to use these tools and getting the most out of them, and also making them work for you. How I use these tools will look very different to how you use these tools, and that's fine. So I'm not here to give you exactly what I do and have you copy that. I'm just here to hopefully inspire you to go away and have a play. And so I want to talk about using AI effectively through the lens of Chrome DevTools and a big, messy code base. But I also want to touch upon this from two slightly different angles. To briefly talk about how we do this as an organization. And here you can swap organization for product team or an engineering team, or whatever sort of size of team you're in. And then I want to talk a lot about us as individuals and how we can work to get the most out of this. So as an organization, you might have seen recently, people are starting to realize that using AI means that you need to understand what benefits you're getting out of it. Crucially, it means that you need to measure the success and how good this technology is. It's kind of wild if you reflect that we had these tools come up and everyone just started throwing money at them without thinking of, are we actually getting benefit out of this, like for the amount of money we're spending on a daily basis. And so I'm going to play a little game this morning, get your energy up. I'll be honest, I've shoehorned this in because I found a way to generate pictures online, and you'll see what I mean in a second. We're going to play Jack's Wheel of Fortune of metrics, okay? I think when I did this slide, my son had woken up at 4:30 a.m., and I was a little bit out of it. So just kind of roll with me on this one. Okay, so we're going to do good or bad metric. And this is the generator that I really wanted to use. You can generate your own Wheel of Fortune boards, and so I had to make use of that. So lines of code, good or bad metric? Thank you. Hopefully, if you all said good, then we're in a bit of trouble. Yeah, lines of code for generating or tracking AI usage is an appalling metric. It was an appalling metric pre-AI. You can't define the quality of a feature by how many lines of code it is. If anything, lines of code are a complete liability, and you should have as few of them as possible. So this is just a bad metric in terms of tracking lines of code. You can also easily think how you could game this, and you would game this by writing dreadful, verbose code. You would leave a bunch of nonsense comments, etc. It just doesn't work. Next one, pull requests sent for review. Good or bad metric? Bad, thank you. The energy. Yes, same thing. I can game this by taking one pull request, splitting it up. That says nothing about the quality of the work if I'm just sending a bunch of pull requests. Finally, my favorite one, tokens used per engineer per month. Good or bad metric? Bad. Yes, again, the amount of tokens you use has no impact on what you ship at all. If anything, it's the same thing. Too many is probably a negative sign. But what's been interesting is we've been trying to think internally about how we actually can track this. We're all being encouraged to use AI. Shock horror, I work at a company that builds AI things, and we're being told to use AI. But we do want to do so in sort of an informed way. And so we've been trying to think about this in terms of how do we track the actual quality and impact of shipping more when we're using AI. So whilst the pure literal count of pull requests is a pretty bad metric, we've started thinking about tracking the amount of pull requests that get reverted or maybe cause a bug or cause a regression that we have to fix. So here you can look at not the absolute number, but assuming that that number is going up because of AI, you can look at how many are then having to be undone or causing you more work later on. Similar vein, the amount of production outages. This is different for us because we don't have like a live product. DevTools is on your machine. But if you build a SaaS company or a product online that people use, you can also consider tracking this. If you're shipping a load more, but the outages are going up at a similar rate, then something probably is going wrong. Shipping fast is a good aim, but only if it can be done in a controlled way. And if you are pushing to adopt AI in your team or you want to experiment with it, I think it's really important to give people space to do this. It's very hard to just one day come in and say, start using AI, and then head out the room again. I wrote a little bit more of this in an article on Lead Dev, and I'll share the slides later on. I think it's important to carve out space here, whether that's a week where you explicitly ask people to use AI a bit more, and at the end of the week you share your wins and your losses. I think it's also important to define the rules of how we use AI and what we feel comfortable delegating to an AI versus what we should hold on to as the software engineers in control. I think it's fair to say at this point you can delegate writing code to the AI, but I feel incredibly strongly that you must not delegate the responsibility of being a software engineer to the AI. This means that what you build and what you send out for review is code that you should feel absolutely 100% confident in, regardless of the means by which those characters ended up in the text file. And we'll touch on more about this later, because I think there's one thing we could focus on, it's this idea of responsibility. I think it's also important to spend time learning your agent and contributing as a team to making it work better for you and your team. So going back to the DevTools repository, we have this folder of agents, or .agents, and in here we have skills that we all land that help the AI work more productively in our code base, and these are specific to our code base. To give you a concrete example of where we've used this recently, someone on our team finished a huge amount of work dealing with how DevTools understands and uses source maps, the details of which are very technical and honestly far over my head. But he landed the work, and then he also landed a skill teaching the AI all about what we've done and how to utilize source maps. So now if I'm ever exploring the code base with AI and I touch upon something to do with source maps, it's going to pull in this, and it now immediately has a bunch more context from the person who is responsible for the implementation of source maps within DevTools. And we have a bunch of these. We're growing them all the time, and this is a really nice way to sort of knowledge gather and share helpful advice. I think it's also important that you provide a safe space for people to sort of ask about AI, share times where it didn't work, share frustrations, and just generally also vent a little bit. We have a chat room at work, and before I show you the name, I'd like you to know that I did not name it. But it's the no stupid questions bit. I'm ignoring the first half. And in here, it's just a safe space where people can ask questions. We kind of deliberately don't have managers in this space, so there's no fear of being judged if you're hating on AI for a bit. And that's been a really nice, valuable resource. And finally, and this maybe is more towards the folks in here who sort of maybe own a business or are responsible for budgets and so on, you need to also remember to set some spending limits. This was my favorite article recently, which was one company that spent $500 million on Claude in 1 month. The company is unknown. I feel like it will become known at some point, and I'm very excited by that, but I'm sure someone probably got a little slap on the wrist for this one. But yes, you do not want this to be you. This also applies, by the way, if you're using this personally outside of work. I once spent $100 to rewrite some CSS, and it was not value for money. So now I want to talk about using AI as an individual. And really, this is kind of my journey through from a skeptic to, I would say, still a healthy skeptic, but someone who has found a way where it can slot in and be beneficial to my workflow. I talked already about being aware of the hype, and I think that's obviously very true. There's so much happening all the time at the moment. I also think you have to be aware of who the advice is coming from and the context in which they're giving it. So I listened to a podcast recently with this chap called Boris Cherny. I don't know Boris personally. I have nothing against him. I'm sure he's a lovely man. But he talked in this article about how coding is solved, and he just uses tokens and throws them at Claude to have it generate code. And that's fine, but there are two things I would point out when you see a headline like this, like coding is solved. Firstly, how much do we think Boris has to pay for a Claude tokens? Bear in mind, he is the head of Claude Code. I think that's probably 0, so that's one thing. Secondly, is Boris or his company financially better off if you use more tokens? And the answer to that is also yes. Now, I have to recognize the immense irony of me making that and pointing that out, because I am in the exact same spot here. I mean, I'm not here telling you coding is solved, but yeah, I don't have to spend a penny when I use AI at work. So there is also, that's to say, you should also take everything that I say with, there'll be some subconscious bias here that I don't have to think about this, fortunately, when I'm using it at work. If I use it personally, I do, but I appreciate not everyone works for a company that literally provide AI models, and so please bear that in mind when you're listening to me. So please do think critically about what people are saying. Read those articles. Like, that was a really good podcast. I enjoyed listening to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree with everything that was said. As I said, the best developers have spent years mastering the tools that they use, and I think AI is no different. We were kind of sold this idea of this magical silver bullet that would come along and fix all our problems and make us irrelevant as software developers. That hasn't happened as of yet, and I don't foresee it happening, at least I hope not, in the near future. We talked about you can delegate writing code, but you shouldn't delegate responsibility. I also think it's really important, particularly for those of you in the room maybe at the earlier stage of your career, to not delegate the learning to the AI either. By this, I don't mean that you can't use AI to help you. Have it explain some concepts to you. Ask it questions if you don't understand something. Give it some code and ask it to explain this to you. But you must make sure that you are learning properly, and it is just a tool for you. I still think knowing the general principles of programming, understanding the language you're working in, is always going to be important. And if not for anything else, because when you interview for a job, they're not going to sit you and ask you to vibe code something with Claude. They're going to ask you to build something properly, and they're going to want to test that your knowledge is there. And so with that, I want to run into the snappily titled Jack's Rules for Using AI Effectively and Deliberately. AI is a tool, and you have to learn how to use it. You also have to learn how to use it for yourself, and all of us will have different preferences and ways we want to do that. But these are sort of the general principles that I've been following that have helped me. I think firstly, start small. I think there's an ambition to use AI for everything. If you've not used it before, just pick one of the providers, use the free tier, pick your favorite environment or your editor or whatever it may be, and just use it. It doesn't really matter what you do here. And also, I would say something that I've done, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but bear with me, is I want you to then have a task you want to do, either at work or on a side project, and I want you to only use AI. All you're allowed to do is prompt the AI. I don't want you to do this because I think that's how we should build software, but if you do this and you limit yourself to only using AI, you will very quickly find the frustrations and the limitations and the bits where it works for you and the bits where it doesn't work for you. So it's almost a forcing function to hit those problem areas quicker. I think you should also define your rules personally for how you want to use AI, and this is particularly true outside of work if you have side projects and whatnot. I have a side project, a game I've been working on for 3 or 4 years, and I used to love after work, especially if I'd had a frustrating day, I would fire up this game. I'm the only developer on it. I don't have to have anyone review my code, and I can just be really productive and write code and have a lovely time. I started using AI, and I honestly got a little bit down that it felt like I wasn't writing as much code anymore, and I'd lost that enjoyment from it. On the other hand, with AI and my limited time, I'm able to make a lot more progress a lot more quickly on building out my side project. And so now I make the explicit decision in an evening when I'm working on this. Do I want to use AI and make more progress, or actually do I just want to write some code by hand? And either is fine, but just be aware of what you're using it for and how you feel about it. Just ask what you're trying to achieve and how does AI actually help here. It might be that you don't even need to use AI because the problem isn't really that complicated. I'd also encourage you all to experiment. The only way to learn this stuff and learn all its nuances is to try it out in a bunch of different ways. Try out new MCP servers, new approaches, watch videos of people on YouTube showing you how they use AI in their workflow, and just build stuff and see what happens. And this is something that I've been doing and really enjoying. Now, I don't want to intimidate you with how cool I am, but I'm going to anyway. One of the things I really like is trains. I've said it, OK? And I was lucky enough last year to move into a house that had an empty shed in the garden. And my parents, I don't know if my wife approves this, bought me a model train set to have in the shed. And so I haven't seen my wife in 2 years, but I've got a really good collection of model trains. But all these trains have different numbers for when I control them. It's really cool. And I could never remember what the numbers were. And one day I decided to ask Claude to help me. And now I have the train controller. Look at that. Whoa. This isn't even all the trains I have either. I've cut some off just to not overwhelm you with coolness. But this was fun. I spent half an hour in Claude. I deployed this online. It's a local web app. All the data is just on my phone. I had a lot of fun building this out. And I generally use this every time I go into the shed. And my 2-year-old son also loves watching these. I have a Thomas. And obviously, all of this is just for him, and I take no personal pleasure in it. Also, because I'm a software developer and it's a rite of passage, I didn't like any of the to-do apps that exist. I didn't want to pay for any. And what I really wanted was a way to use voice to list out my to-dos. I like thinking these through on dog walks. So I built the Jack to-do app, which does exactly what you think it does. And it's also got voice input, so I can dictate into it and have it convert that into a list of tasks for me. And I've had a lot of fun experimenting with those things. But also, you shouldn't just reach and use AI just because it's there and you can. It can do a lot very quickly. That doesn't mean you should. I don't want you to focus, or lose your focus, rather, on the quality of your output, particularly in a work environment, or your understanding of what you're actually building and how that thing works. And also, unlike me, who works at a model provider, don't forget this actually costs actual real money. And so sometimes, you can take a 15-minute piece of work, use AI, but you spent $3 to save yourself 5-10 minutes, and that might not make sense. So just think about when you do want to use it. I had this happen genuinely last week, which really inspired some of these slides, whereas at one point I realized I had 5 parallel sort of conversations with AI happening. I had a terminal tab with DevTools bug fix. I was reviewing someone else's code. I was working on an implementation plan for another feature. I was building a demo website for something I needed to test in DevTools, and as I was doing that, I found a random bug in DevTools, and I was trying to fix it as well. And I genuinely had 5 parallel AI conversations going on. And at the end of the day, when I sent these for review and I read through this, I realized that there were very straightforward mistakes in every single one of these bits of work. I don't know if other people can. My brain cannot keep up with this amount going on, and I cannot manage to flip between them regularly and keep context and keep the quality high. So I realized that, yes, I'd used AI a bunch here, right? I'd maxed out my tokens, and I was good on the leaderboard. But the actual output and the quality at the end was really substandard, and I was really not happy with it. And so that's led me to be a lot more strict. I now will always have a primary focus, with or without AI. There are some tasks I'm willing to kick off in the background. For example, if I'm prototyping or I need a prototype website or to make a change in DevTools, which I'm not trying to land, I might have AI do that in the background. And often I'll have an AI helping me with things like triaging incoming code reviews, doing the initial code review for me to give me some ideas. But I'm always focusing on one main task at once. And this is really important because you have to understand the resulting architecture and implementation. This is not the thing you can delegate to the AI. You should be, when you're working on a feature with AI, you should be asking it questions constantly, refining its plan, making sure you understand every little bit of that. You should not fall into the trap of auto-approving in blind trust, the hit enter, yes, 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 and then before you know it, it's all gone awry. And I like to think about this as we are pairing, not delegating. So the AI is there to help you, give advice, question your decisions, you can question its decisions, but you're not just there blindly letting it do what it wants. And sometimes you can also turn to tooling or building tooling to help you with this as well. So one thing I noticed, so I use AI in the terminal, just my preferred environment of choice. And I would often prompt it, I found a bug in something and I would prompt it. And I get a plan back, it looks like this. And I don't know if this is just me, but have you ever done the thing where you read something and you think you understand it, and then 2 minutes later you don't understand it at all, and if someone asked you about it, you could not actually explain it to them? Because you've read it, but you haven't properly taken in. And this happened to me, and this happened at work. One day I sent someone a change to review. They asked a question about a bit of logic, why I'd taken this particular approach, and I realized I could not explain why, because I had delegated all that to the AI, and I did not understand what I'd actually produced. And that was a real kind of slap in the face moment for me where I realized, okay, this strategy is not working for me. But one of the things I also realized is I'm much better at reviewing stuff outside of the terminal. And so I built a little command line tool. It's open source. It's called AI Review. What this does is it gives the AI a way to fire up a browser with its plan, formatted nicely, where you can leave inline comments. So AI comes up with a plan. I ask it to review it, and it gives me something that looks like this in the browser. And I can approve this. It's very similar. It's inspired by the kind of GitHub pull request UI. But also, I can leave inline comments. And for whatever reason, when I'm working and reviewing code, reviewing a plan, and it looks like this in the browser, I'm much more likely to take it in and think about it properly. It just works for me and my brain. And in this particular case with this bug, I was actually able to suggest a much better solution. There we go. Where we actually could use a modern dialog component and skip the whole bug at all. And that's something I wouldn't have caught if I'd just skimmed the plan in the terminal. I think Mariam is going to talk a lot more about this, so I'm not going to dive into the details here, but building fast without losing control is really the secret here, and so I'll let her talk a lot more about that up next. I also think it's important to be deliberate on defining the modes of operation when you're using AI, because there are times where you can use it differently because the goal is different. For example, one thing I love using AI for is prototyping, like just throwing an idea up and seeing if it works or not. Here, you do not care about the code quality. You want to get something working to put in front of some users to see if they like it or not. You're going to then throw it away afterwards. In this case, I'm not doing detailed code review because I don't need to. But if I'm planning, I'm really going back and forth with the AI. I'm asking it to give me different options, like, give me 4 ways we can implement this feature to help me think through all the corner cases. And if I'm implementing, as we've shown, I'm paying a lot of detail to the plan and reviewing the code in a lot of detail as well. And I would say one thing that's really unlocked my understanding and productivity with AI is understanding context windows. So context windows is the amount of space an AI has in a conversation and the amount of stuff it can keep in memory effectively. And over time, since the first ChatGPT came out, whenever it was, and lots of models have been announced, this number broadly has gone up. It's seen as a good number. I think the latest Gemini is a 1 million token context window. I think the other providers are broadly in the same ballpark. But total context window really isn't that important in my experience. It's less important than how much of it you're using. They've done studies where it's proven that once your window fills up beyond a certain point, the AI's comprehension and its output is going to suffer because it's effectively like it's got too much in its head and it can't produce the best results. I think also when it comes to context windows, there's a really good technique where you can know when to actually bail out of a conversation and start all over again. Every time you start a new conversation with an AI, it has no memory of the previous conversation, and you can really use that to your advantage. So this context window sort of limitation has been deemed the smart zone by Matt Pocock, and he defines a sort of smart zone and a dumb zone, as it were. So you might have a context window that is 1 million tokens. Yep. But that doesn't mean you want to fill that up and you want to use it. We define the smart zone as roughly about 200,000 tokens, give or take. If you get to a point where you're getting past this, then you really need to consider pausing and doing something, whether that's asking the AI to write a summary to disk so you can then pick it up again. Some AI tools have a compact tool which will let you squash and summarize the conversation down to continue. But you really don't want to be going into this dumb zone where you're using over 200,000 tokens. Firstly, the output is going to suffer, but secondly, all of those tokens are money, and so you really want to minimize the amount of money you're using as well. And remembering that the AI starts from a fresh slate every single time is really, really valuable, because often you might find a situation where the AI has just decided it's going to do something a certain way, however many times you tell it that it's not going to do it a certain way. And this, you can end up wasting a lot of tokens and time and money trying to convince the AI that it is wrong and you should do it differently. Instead, at this point, you should bail. If it's going wrong, just quit, exit. If you're using, hopefully your code is in version control in a Git repo, whatever it may be, so you know that you can bail, you can undo all these changes very easily. I think Gemini CLI and others support a /clear command to get rid of everything from the context and start all over again. Or you can literally just exit the process and start a brand new one. And next up, I want to talk a little bit about skills. So skills, for those who aren't aware, are markdown files that you can put into your agent's sort of configuration, and they teach it specific information that it can draw upon at certain points in time. These are a really cheap way to provide context, like that source map skill I showed you earlier. I want to call out a couple of ones that I really like, but I also, it'd be unfair of me to try and claim that I came up with these. I am a big fan of stealing skills and taking inspiration from other folks on the internet. Here's two very popular code repos full of skills that you can use. I don't think you should just copy all of these and dump them in and just start using them. I think you should go through them, find the ones that seem interesting to you, copy them into your configuration, and then tweak them a little bit. For example, I've taken a few from these, and I've tweaked them to be specific to DevTools and with a few little bits that are specific to the way we do things. But for example, I have a skill called Write Plan, which encourages the AI to take a plan and break it down into a series of small implementation steps. In my experience, this makes it much more likely it's going to do a good job. You can also spot issues in its plan a lot more easily, and you can interrupt it at different stages to ask it questions if you need to. The next one is rather aggressively named the nuclear code review. I didn't name this. And this is just a skill, I think this is Cursor actually shared this one. And this is just an AI that does really good, thorough code review. And I think it's also really important to talk about how I use this skill in particular. Like, let's say you send me a change to review. What I am not going to do is use this skill, take everything that AI gives me, and just send it straight back to you word for word. What I am going to do is read the code and the change myself, form my own opinions. I'm going to invoke this in the background, and I'm going to see what it comes up with. Often what will happen is this might come up with 5 or 6 suggestions for things I could change, and I might hate 4 of them, but one of them is something I didn't think about. And that's kind of how I'm using it. Like, it's given me suggestions. AI is not human. It will not take offense, so I can tell it that some of its suggestions are rubbish, and I can just pick the ones I like. I even have a skill about writing skills to try and make the AI write better skills. And then I even have a skill about writing, how to write skills that write skills. Yeah, I don't, but you could imagine that you can keep this meta sort of approach to skills going on for as long as you would like. And so as I round up, I'll just kind of trying to remind you of the high-level techniques I've used that I think have really increased my productivity when using AI on a big, messy code base like DevTools. Start small. Don't try and run before you can walk. Just try it out on a few personal projects, a little bit of time at work on something. Experiment, try different approaches. You can even try different agents, different models, different styles of prompting, different skills, whatever it may be. Define your rules and be comfortable with how you personally are going to use AI, both at work or particularly in a sort of personal setting. Don't reach for it just because you can. Often we should still be writing things by hand and doing it ourselves. And we should also do that because this does cost actual money. you must understand the results. That you, as a software engineer, are still responsible for everything that you create, regardless of what tools you use along the way. We would never say that I don't need to check my code because I wrote it in Vim and therefore it's superior, although we should. But we seem to allow that for AI, and I don't think that's a good idea in the slightest. Think about the different ways you can use AI, whether that's prototyping, reviewing, implementing. Understand and be aware of context windows. Some AI tools actually don't show you the context window usage by default. If that's the case, you need to go and figure out how to make it show you that by default, else you're going to burn through a lot of cache and a lot of time. So if there's one thing you take away and you're using AI already, if it does not show you the amount of tokens you've used in the conversation, find out how to do it or move to another tool that does. And that will really, you'll thank me for that in the long run. And finally, write lots of skills. Skills are great because they're also really cheap to make. They're just markdown files. So you can make them really quickly. You can ask AI to help you make them. You can try them out. You can iterate. You can delete the ones you don't like. It really doesn't matter. They're very cheap. And before I finish, I think it would be silly of me to finish without talking a little bit about what I think AI means for software developers. I think this is the big question. We've heard people, mostly CEOs of big companies who build models, say that software engineering is dead or is going to change drastically. And I think whilst it is going to change, I'm here to hopefully give some good news, at least in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. As we've talked about, I don't think you can delegate responsibility, learning, or your understanding of code and the features you build and the products you work on to AI. I think people get worried because this idea of vibe coding came out where you just ask AI, it generates stuff, and then done. You ship it, and you're finished. And I think vibe coding is fine. I don't have a problem with it. My train app is vibe coded because it's only ever going to live on my phone. It's built for me. I do not care about the quality of the code. All I care about is the trains. But you can use vibe coding to build prototypes and dig around and play and explore, and that's not a problem. But it's not full software engineering. Writing lines of code has never been the tricky part of being a software engineer. It's everything else that goes around that. And when I think people think that AI is going to take over software engineering, I think they're confusing two slightly different things. I would encourage people to think about this as not confusing writing code with building robust software systems. I think AI is really good at the former overall. I think it's less good at the second one, and I think that will always be the responsibility of humans to manage that and know how to wield these tools effectively. So to round off, I'll leave you with sort of 3 bits of wisdom from me. Learn how software works. I still think you're going to need to know programming, the principles of programming, know the languages you're working in inside out, know the pros and cons, know how to trade off design patterns, and so on. In this era where code is relatively cheap to generate, learn how the platform works as well. In our case, or a lot of us, I assume, work on websites or web apps, and the web is the platform we use. I think Harry's going to touch on this later, but the web as a platform is an amazing distribution mechanism to build products and deliver value to users. Learn how that works, learn all the new APIs, learn its nuances and edge cases. I think most importantly, stay curious and have fun. Although it is draining at times with this AI hype, I also genuinely am having a lot of fun using AI and increasing my output, both for my personal side projects. I think I have 5 or 6 apps now on my phone that are all generated by Claude for me, which I use every day. And I love doing that. I also, it is nice to be able to feel more productive and get more done at work as well. So stay curious, play around, and make sure that you don't take it too seriously and enjoy yourself along the way. And with that, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day.